sometimes people will fake it because of their ministry role and what they think is required of them to be at a certain level of health while their marriage is falling apart. And there have been times where we've said, hey, we're going to ask you to take a break from your role and stop pretending like everything's okay so that you can actually go and get the help that you need. Because there's a weird dynamic that happens when you label somebody as a leader or a pastor or a department head. We start to think that that means we should be perfect. And so we're going to pretend that like we are.
I think in the last maybe 2 years, gosh, it's just been shocking. Like, I think that people we just never thought, would get a divorce are getting a divorce. And, people who have, been a part of helping other couples get through divorce, get through and make it, aren't making it themselves. When you're leading, it doesn't disqualify you from having marriage issues. And so I think that's the tendency. And I think the one of the very, schemes of the enemy is to make you think that you need to be beyond that. And that's just not reality. And I think that's one of the things that we try to do as far as our staff culture and, how we lead is really just to give people permission to be human. And the reality is that every marriage will go through hard stuff. Every single one. But if we can, as a body of Christ and as leaders, go, no, like, you are still human and you are still going to have hard times. It's okay to be human and it's okay to have a hard time. It's not okay to hide. So just let us help you.
Yeah. Now that Lisa has jumped in, so are the three of us in agreement that these women who say, I just want him to know without me having to tell him, can we all just say, come on, we're too dense?
Yeah.
Josh, you said it. We're too dense. We can't read your mind.
Yeah, that's somebody who just wants to be miserable. She does, just...
Let me say this, though, okay? Because
I'm going to agree with what you say. We can try.
Here's the thing.
Just because I don't believe or agree doesn't mean I can't learn from you.
Why did you have to bring that up?
Okay, that one I'm super embarrassed about.
Do you like me?
Do I like you?
Yeah.
As an individual or as a podcast?
Just as a person.
No, I like you.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I don't have any interest in appearing to be stronger than I am.
I ain't bow to Nebuchadnezzar's statue. He gonna lead. You feel me?
How do we love people who see the world differently than we do?
What would it look like if we truly loved all of our neighbors? Could listening to their stories be the first step? This is Seacoast Church, and there's way more to talk about.
All right, love this time with our lead pastors, Josh and Lisa Surratt. They're here to talk a lot about marriage, but we also managed to talk some other stuff like their comfort levels with eating and drinking after other people, important stuff like that. Even though a lot of the discussion today is relational talk, what I love in this conversation is their hearts being clearly revealed that they're more focused on staff members' health rather than the production of church staff. Unfortunately, this isn't always the case. Even in churches today, you'll hear some of the reasons me and many others are happy to be able to call this church family and church home. It's greatly due to the culture that pastors Josh and Lisa Surratt have for us to work in. So we're thankful to have them here today. I know you're going to enjoy. Oh, well, it's good to have you guys.
Yeah,
awesome.
Good to be here.
The people in charge. Y'all enjoy being in charge?
Some days.
That's probably not how y'all think about
definitely.
it, though. Exactly.
Definitely depends on the day.
So y'all took a good solid break, leading by example for all of us to do the same. And it was, did y'all say May or June? June. Y'all get a good time away. I'm curious. I know you would consider yourself more extroverted, correct?
I think I lean that way. Yeah.
And are you more introverted or no? Like when it comes to how you recharge?
Well, I think it's a occupational hazard.
Yeah.
Or not hazard. I think that over time, I went from being just over the line of extroverted to just over the line of introverted, mostly because our life is just, it's
full and it's public.
Yeah, it's full and it's public, which is amazing. But I definitely find myself needing to kind of be home,
she
be
was
with
in
my
heaven
people.
She was in heaven. Yeah.
On our break, yes.
Do you ever want a break from him? Like, is
No.
there ever? So do y'all ever need like, I just need some space by myself? Because I would be one of them. Like it is, and Priscilla knows, like, especially when we were in the weeds of raising young children, she was like, if there's an opportunity that I can grab all the kids and just leave Joey alone for a couple hours, it'll do something for his mind. That's great. Like, and it was beneficial because it was everybody gone for a little bit. And I love my wife, but so y'all don't ever need a break?
We both enjoy our own alone time. I definitely enjoy, like, if I can go do what I want to do for a little while, because he does not like to do some of the things I like to do. Mm-hmm. So it's
and
actually
vice versa.
Yeah.
Vice versa. Like what? Like outdoorsy stuff or active?
I love to go wander around and shop at,
Gotcha.
for home stuff, or I love plants. I like to go to a Bite a Wild, or, I like doing like.
And you're cool with doing that by yourself?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. In fact, it's
we
more
have
miserable.
each other's location, obviously, like on like the Life 360. And I feel like anytime I open it up to see where Lisa's at, like if she's alone and has free time, it's going to be a Bite a While or a furniture shop or, a coffee shop. Sometimes you just let it go.
Sometimes I like to just go wander around downtown, sit at a coffee shop.
But I do as well. Like I'm this weekend, I'll be going from Georgia. We'll all go to Georgia for a soccer game after church on Sunday, and then I'm going to a buddy's place in North Carolina for 2 days. And I actually have found myself daydreaming about that drive because I'll drive by myself. Then I'll be with people as soon as I get there, but I'll drive about 3-4 hours by myself, and I'm like,
which he loves, and I don't get it. I mean, I do, but I don't know.
Podcast, music, or silence, or a little bit of both?
A little bit of both, but more silence than probably any of the rest. So I just like to. This morning I went on a run, didn't bring my phone or headphones. Sometimes I just like to get lost in my thoughts.
So do y'all try to find some food excursions when y'all are away? Like, are y'all foodies? Do y'all try to get some good food? Do y'all find that our parents' generation are a smaller percentage of them are foodies? It feels like maybe Gen X, we're the first people who are just like, nice restaurants, let's go check them out. My parents, they don't care. They're just like, let's just go to the place that we like, and if we want to go somewhere neat, we'll ask Joey and Priscilla.
Yeah, same with ours. Both of our parents are creatures of habit. They're going to go to their same couple of restaurants. Church last weekend, we ended up, I won't name the name of the restaurant, but a little burger and fried chicken place that, that they love. But we are foodies. We love finding food.
Big time foodies. In fact, I keep a note on my phone that has... well, first of all, we're big-time date night people.
So you got to keep that list.
Which because we enjoy food so much, most of the time our date nights are, what new restaurant are we going to try? Or what's one of our favorites that we're going to try? And so I keep a running list. It is for people who come out of town. They come into town, they're from out of town, and we want to be good hosts and we can share some ideas, but it's also for us. So that I keep a running list of all the new ones that have come into town, so ones we want to try. And I've written up little reviews for the different, some of our favorites, just kind of, so.
You want a podcast segment, Charleston Restaurants?
Come on,
I'll do it. There you go. I've been wanting to talk about this for a while on this podcast, and tag you're it. And it's a very random thing to get into before we get into some serious stuff. But I come into contact with, and you guys as well, over the course of your life, you have people with different comfort levels of eating after people. And so I want to ask y'all, first of all, I'm assuming most married couples, are y'all comfortable eating and drinking after each other with anything?
Pretty much.
Not gum.
Not gum. Dairy products, is that different?
No.
Same. I would be the same way when it comes to Priscilla. Now, kids, different for you guys?
No. Not for me.
Does it start to change with as you get further and further away from your inner circle? Does it start to change? Because I have been around people where it doesn't change. It's like somebody I've never met before. Here, you try it, and I'm like, oh gosh, I don't want them to feel bad. But as you get further from your inner circle, do you try eat and drink after less people?
If I don't know you, I'm not going to eat after you. But any of my close friends.
I don't know, though. You are a bit of a germaphobe.
I am
so
a germaphobe.
If there was any hint that
even
person,
if my kids
and we have
have
certain
been,
friends,
out
I won't
sweating.
name them, but we have certain friends that she probably won't eat or drink after because you just know that they probably have,
please don't name them.
Been sick or
I am a little crazy about sickness. So, if anybody's had the stomach bug in the last month, I'm literally like, nope.
And you have other people that are like, we had the stomach bug, but that was this morning. We're better now.
And I'm like, nope, no. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. How about you? Are you weird with drinking? Let me give you an example. So let's say some guy that you've met a couple of times. He's a new worship leader at one of our campuses. You're like, man, I really like that guy. I'm glad he's on staff. You're not friends with him. You don't know him that well. And at all staff, you're like, oh, what kind of drink is that? And he's like, here, try it. It's this new soft drink. Are you going to say, no, thanks?
I'm probably not going to do it.
Yeah. Would you give a reason? You just be like, no, I'm not thirsty.
Yeah, I'm just, even around our house, the last couple of days we've had people over, and I found we had some water bottles, and I found one, and I thought it was mine, but then I was like, wait a minute, is that mine? And I dumped it. So I guess I'm a little bit more.
I think I've made him more germ aware. He's not a germaphobe, but he's a little more germ aware now.
Well, I didn't take microbiology, so ignorance is bliss for me.
And
All right,
did.
so I'm going to take advantage of you sitting here right now. So am I right to say that unless you're really going to put forth some significant effort, it's one of those danged if you do, danged if you don't situations when it comes to germs? You've got to dedicate your life to saying, I got to keep these hands clean after I touch stuff, and to keep them clean, it's warm water for 2 or 3 minutes. So
hand sanitizer definitely works.
So that is a high percentage of stuff being killed on your hands.
Yeah, 98,
Okay.
99%.
Okay.
I would say I am very conscientious about especially if I pump gas, I am not touching anything. I have hand sanitizer in the door of my car.
I do hear that's one of the nastiest things to touch.
I will go from pumping gas to grabbing
a bag of
French
chips,
fry
and I'm literally
problem.
oh gosh, no, stop.
But I do think there is some truth to your body building up immunity to germs, and so I do think that there's truth to the fact that when we were growing up, I didn't get told to wash my hands all the time, any of that stuff. And I think your body kind of learns how to. What I like to say is I've been putting stuff in my body for 45 years that doesn't really belong there in terms of food. My body's really good at getting rid of the things that aren't good for me and, keeping the good stuff. So.
Isn't it true that I want to say the first person that tried to reconcile our ignorance of microbiology with the medical field, I want to say it was a career-ending assertion. He basically said, we've got to change things in the medical field. I wish I would have known that I was going to go this direction, because it's a real historical figure who he spoke up and they laughed at him, and basically that was the end of his career. And now we're looking back on him saying that was a smart doctor who.
That's also why so many people died in the early days of surgery.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because they didn't understand aseptic technique or any of that stuff. So,
all right. So marriage stuff, very happy thing to talk about, and also can be sombering if when we start thinking about all the struggles and challenges. But I want to say one more thing that's kind of funny, but at the same time, this is so interesting. So in an earlier episode, I talked to 3 of our wonderful women on women in society. And I talked about how I've been dabbling with Mary Tyler Moore, the sitcom, and just watching it a little bit here and there. And it just the cultural like lessons. It's unbelievable. And so I watched an episode recently, and I wrote this down. Next time we talk about marriage, I wanted to say this. So this episode would have been released probably in like 73. And the boss, Lou Grant, played by Ed Asner, who's Santa Claus on Elf and everything, the boss is having marriage problems. And he literally confides with Mary Richards, who's played by Mary Tyler Moore, and this other guy in the office, that he's getting marriage counseling or therapy or whatever. And y'all, their reaction, and it never turned around, their reaction was, Lou, no. You are not seeing a therapist. Like, it was doom and gloom. Like, we are so sad, and it never turned around, but at least you're getting help. I was like, oh my gosh. In the 70s, it was like, you are in a mess if you're getting any help. Thanks. I thought that was so crazy.
Yeah.
Because now it's all appreciated. It's all celebrated. Oh, good for you. You're getting help.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well,
It's
I
insane.
mean, what's sad about that is, and I think it's also so interesting, like even thinking about my grandparents were married 50 years. And my mom always jokes, she always says, you know, they were married 50 years and they only had one fight. It just lasted all 50 years.
Gosh, yeah.
And, you know, she just talked about how, like, divorce was never an option.
Yeah.
That was never going to be on the table. But misery was.
Mm-hmm.
And they just, kind of settled for that. So,
And I would imagine y'all's heart for Seacoast couples would be for people to stay married and not be miserable.
well, I think that people don't realize that it is possible.
Mm-hmm.
But it does take work.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of work.
Yeah. So you guys, I know you talk about wanting to be a hope peddler. Like, if somebody came to you and said, I know you've heard them all. I know you've heard all the situations. What I'm about to tell you, though, there's just no way. Are you guys internally thinking, yes, there is? I don't even need to hear the situation, but 9 times out of 10, there's a way. Let me hear it.
I tend to be that way. And I think it's because I've seen so many people come back. I remember one time going to the hospital to visit a guy who's still in our church, and he had a major fall, and he was in like the worst of the worst trauma ICU units, full body cast, and at the time probably in his mid-50s. And I remember looking at him and going, this is hopeless. He's not like this guy. There's no way that he could recover from this, because I'd never seen a body that damaged and destroyed. And now he walks around and he's got a little bit of a limp. You can tell he got hurt, but he's doing great. And I think seeing how the human body can surprise you is so resilient. I think in the same way, relationships can be that way. I know it doesn't always work out that way. And I know there are certain things that, especially abuse, that I'm not saying I would like say, hey, just stick it out, hang in there. But even on the other side of divorce, we've got several friends who have remarried after they got divorced because, they changed and they grew. And so Lisa is not the same person that I married 23 and a half years ago, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, she's changed a lot for the better. And so I just think that, I think a lot of times that people feel like there is no hope. I want to be one voice in their life who is going to at least consider the possibility that what if this could turn around?
Mm-hmm.
Even medically, I do the same thing. I know I keep going back to that, but like I'll be with somebody who got diagnosed with a brain tumor. And I'm like, listen, it's your doctor's job to tell you how long you have to live. But as long as I'm in the room, I'm going to be a voice of hope. I'm going to be somebody who wants to, like, let's pray, believe, hope for the best, and, take it as it comes if it doesn't work out.
Yeah. I think this would unfold a lot of insight with just kind of y'all's hearts, and then a lot of people are interested theologically, how do you handle this and how do you handle that? Like, how would y'all, and I know it's not unprecedented, it's something that's happened before, but how would you guys walk through let's say an important person on staff who is going through a divorce. Like you said that you guys have friends, y'all have friends who have been divorced and are remarried, and you're still friends with them. So let's say there's an important couple on staff and they're just like, hey, we don't think this is going to work. How do you guys help steward that process, or how would Seacoast in general, if they were doing it, how you guys would want them to?
Yeah. I mean, it's such a hypothetical.
Sure.
That every divorce is unique, right? I mean, there's people who have gone through divorce for 1,000 different reasons. There's infidelity, there's abuse, any of that stuff. And so I think if that couple was going through a divorce and there were some like big sin issues that were going on, I say big as if they're small ones. If they're just small sins, it's not a big deal. But we would want to like get them in whatever environment is going to give them the best chance to heal that relationship and to grow through it. And so, but I wouldn't like, let's just say the scenario is that Joe, his wife, he found out she was cheating, and he wasn't perfect, and she just decided, I'm done, I'm walking away. I'm not going to fire Joe because, there's circumstances that are beyond his control that he's walking through it. I want to love Joe the best that I can. But on the other side of it, sometimes people will fake it because of their ministry role and what they think is required of them to be at a certain level of health while their marriage is falling apart. And there have been times where we've said, hey, we're going to ask you to take a break from your role and stop pretending like everything's okay so that you can actually go and get the help that you need. Because there's a weird dynamic that happens when you label somebody as a leader or a pastor or a department head. We start to think that means we should be perfect. And so we're going to pretend like we are, and we're going to learn how to act really well.
Yeah.
And so like,
well, that's huge too, because that puts people in a place to where they can say, hey, they care about my marriage, and their go-to isn't necessarily going to say, you got to go if your marriage, because I think that's in a lot of churches, that's probably a fear is, hey, I'm supposed to be an example. I don't want my leader to know that my marriage is jacked, because then maybe he'll see me unfit for ministry and I don't have a job.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you this, Lisa. You guys have been in ministry for a long time. How long have y'all been leading Seacoast? Like
10 years.
10 years. Is there waves to where you guys will, talk behind closed doors and be like, man, it just seems like marriages are under attack? Has there been like a trajectory since you guys have had, because you guys talk to couples that are leading other churches, y'all rub shoulders with tons of people all over the country, but then you also have, I'm sure campus pastors will reach out and just say, hey, just so you know, so-and-so and so-and-so are having a hard time, people that are important to you guys all over the campuses. Like, is there a pattern that you see, ups and downs, or is it just a constant, things are getting worse, or how are things nowadays with marriages?
I don't know if I would say there's a pattern, but I will say I think in the last maybe 2 years, gosh, it's just been shocking. Like, I think that people we just never thought, would get a divorce are getting a divorce. And, people who have, been a part of helping other couples get through divorce, get through and make it, aren't making it themselves. And so that has been really disappointing. And, but again, it goes back to the same point that you were talking about, though. When you're leading, it doesn't disqualify you from having marriage issues. And so I think that's the tendency. And I think the one of the very, schemes of the enemy is to make you think that you need to be beyond that. And that's just not reality. And I think that's one of the things that we try to do as far as our staff culture and, how we lead is really just to give people permission to be human. And the reality is that every marriage will go through hard stuff. every single one. And so our hope is, and I think the Lord has given me such a passion to help leaders stay, leading for the long haul, not just for a sprint, but for the marathon. And so many times, hiding will keep you from, it will make you. I remember when we went through our really hard time in marriage. I mean, we've had, several seasons of hard things, but probably one of our hardest seasons. I mean, Josh was in ministry, and for a while, we felt like we can't talk to anybody about this. And so the hiding amplified everything. We felt so alone. We felt so ashamed. We felt so lost, like we don't, there's no solutions here. And I just think that so long as we let the enemy keep playing that game, he's going to take ground. But if we can, as a body of Christ and as leaders, go, no, like you are still human and you are still going to have hard times. It's okay to be human and it's okay to have a hard time. It's not okay to hide. So just let us help you.
Yeah.
And so, I think that the more we share, the more that we give permission for people to be human and to go, hey, we want to help. That's where, we just see that, and to your point about how counseling used to be such a, social faux pas. Gosh, what are you doing? We've tried really hard to make it very normal. We try to lead the way in saying, hey, we're going to an intensive, not because the house is on fire, but because we want to be intentional to invest in our marriage. And if you want anything to thrive, it's going to take intentional investment. And so, so for us to go and do an intensive, people are like, so you're really going to an intensive? Yeah, we are.
My favorite was we were getting ready to leave. My son, Miles, who's 17, he was 16 at the time. He and I were standing downstairs in our kitchen, and he was like, hey, Dad, how bad are things? It's like, no, we're going to be all right, but it's not that it's bad. We just want to invest in it. But, because it still carries a bit of a stigma, or even at least a question about it. But, and I think that, to Lisa's point, I want to say something. She said it's a disappointment to us, and it is, that we see people that we just love so much that are going through divorces. Those people aren't disappointments to us. The fact that that it feels like we're in a season where the enemy is taking ground in marriages and people are giving up, it just, we want more for people. We want, because we know how hard it is. We know how hard it is on families and kids. But I think about you, Joey, and we've talked on this podcast about your mental health crisis that you went through. It wasn't, it was okay for you to go through a mental health crisis, but it wasn't okay for you to stay there forever. You couldn't be doing what you're doing now had you not. And again, that's a little different because we're talking about like a health related thing there. But like when we say it's okay for people to go through challenges, of course it is, but it's not okay to stay broken or to stay stuck. Like we want to create an expectation. No, actually, we want you to grow to a place of health so that you can lead more effectively and you can help lead people to a place where you actually are living and experiencing that life that you're trying to depict to people that they can as well. So anyways.
But I also think that also requires a period of time where we aren't going, produce. We need you to produce, while you're also trying to get healthy, while you're trying to, and so I think that's like the big, I don't know, it has been a beautiful gift to us that we have the ability to go for the health and wellness of our people, for the health and wellness of marriages, for the health and wellness of our church. We're going to put the people first. They're our greatest. We're like family, but in an organization like Seacoast our people are our greatest asset. I mean, our people are the ones that are, equip the work, equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. Like, we need to be attentive to help the saints stay healthy and equip them. And if they're not, we can't just keep going, produce, because it's just going to burn them out, and we're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, I want to kind of applaud y'all's leadership in that it is a very neat thing, and I don't know if this will be neat for you guys to hear, or y'all have already been accustomed to hearing this, but amongst staffers, the number of people that I hear now saying, hey, I was talking to my therapist the other day. I mean, it's like common dialogue amongst staffers. Now, at least on my team, so I'm only on one team, but if it's any sign as to, my boss, Josh Walters, talking about what him and his therapist talked about, like it's a common, just neat to hear, because me, that's a sign of health. Just the people are conscious of their mental health and what they need to.
And it's such a win. I know not every organization can do it, but we are so pro health of our team, and so
And I hear that's uncommon. I'm going to give you guys an example of it's a specific example that I heard from a very trusted person. If I leave the church name out, will you guys speak very candidly on what y'all think about this?
Yeah.
Okay. So a friend of mine, his brother, recently married, got a job at a mega church, and basically went to them. He's a graphic designer, and he said, I love being at this church, but I'm pulling all-nighters all the time. I just got married, and I would like to have more time with my wife, basically is what he was after. And their answer to him, this is a church that is loved and adored all over the world. Their answer to this guy was, well, there's tons of people who would love your job. And so if you don't think that you can handle it, then okay. And so he quit because he was like, they don't. I basically said, we just got married and I'm pulling all-nighters and I'm unbalanced in my relationship with my wife. And they said, okay, what do y'all think about that? That's not good.
Yeah, I think that the way it was described to me by somebody who worked at, a different environment, but they said, I always felt like I was a commodity, and I was either rising in value or falling in value based on my last performance. And and that makes
tough to hear. Yeah.
That makes me sad. I really, to Lisa's point, I really hope that we would understand that, man, we want to. Healthy people are going to do better work. They're going to create more. And again, that's not why we want them healthy, but healthy people are going to actually contribute to greater degrees. And so, anyways,
and with you guys, I'm speaking on that. That's the goal for your staff people. Obviously, you want staff people to be productive in ministry because you care about ministry, but that is your goal. You want us to be healthy. I'm not again, it goes beyond that, but that for some people, it's hey, you take care of your health. Your job stuff is your job stuff, but you guys actually care about the health.
I care far more about the health than I do about productivity. And maybe that is, I'm sure that's unpopular amongst, but I just think that, it's the idea of the better before bigger, I don't know if you want to tell that story, but I just think when we focus on...
Of course we want him to tell the story.
Well, he's going to have to tell the story.
Well, and it's a story that's been documented before, but it's a Chick-fil-A deal where they were Boston Market or Boston Chicken was actually overtaking Chick-fil-A in market share in Atlanta. And this is late 90s, something like that. And they were having a board meeting and they were discussing how they could... compete faster, expand faster, win more of the market share. And the story goes that after 45 minutes of this board meeting where they're discussing all of these strategies on expansion, Truett Cathy, who was the CEO at the time and notoriously soft-spoken and kind of a mild-mannered guy, starts beating his fist on the table until everybody stops and looks at him. And basically he says, hey, I've been listening for 45 minutes about all of you talking about how we can get bigger, but nobody said a word about how we can get better. If we will get better, the market will demand that we get bigger. Let's focus on getting better. And I think that to some degree that translates to our team, and that if we will get healthier, and again, I think that you can overdo that side of it too. Like we're here on mission. We have work to do. We have stuff that we want to make a difference. We're not just being paid to get together and sing songs and pray together and but if we get healthier as leaders, man, the church is probably going to grow because more people are going to be around, want to be around leaders that are healthy and that are modeling that and are discipling and developing other people. And so I just think it does apply to that. But I do think that generationally, it's funny, I'll be around other leaders who are like, man, are y'all finding with like the 20-somethings and they just don't want to show up to work and they don't yet. And I do think that the pendulum could swing to where, we're so much about health that we forget that we have a mission to do and all of that. But I still would rather err on the side of focusing on people's health than production and correct that if it gets too far that way.
Well, and I think that's the thing. It's when you genuinely care about your team, you care about the health of your team, we are on mission together, we care desperately about the mission. But when we are healthy physically, mentally, spiritually, it's kind of like, you think about when somebody first comes to know the Lord and they are living in sin, they're choosing to live a certain way that maybe is not honoring to God. And, the thought process could be, maybe one approach could be, well, you need to quit doing all these things. Like, here are the rules. Like, if you really want to live a God-honoring life, this is what you need to do. Well, until the heart actually changes, these are just rules, which many would say rules are made to be broken. So, it's...
Well, they certainly don't change people's hearts.
Exactly. And so, but if you get their heart, then it's the Holy Spirit, it's the Lord that changes your heart where you don't actually have desire to do some of those things. Yep. And so it naturally comes. So we can approach this kind of in a same manner of if we are loving our people and we have their heart and their heart is for the mission, they're going to do good work because they are accountable to the Lord. They want to be used by God to do great things and to reach people. And so that is the approach that we just feel you know what? We know that we want to steward our team to the best of our ability, but gosh, let's be after their heart. Let's go after their heart where they love what they get to do. And I'm telling you, we have an incredible team. We have best in the world at so many different areas. And I think we know we're surrounded by a lot of people that are a lot smarter than us. And
not
we're
too many.
Grateful.
Yeah, not too many.
No, but truly, we really have an incredible team. And I think that's the key is that we just keep focusing on encouraging people to be healthy so that they can actually live out what God's called them to do.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate what you guys have shared and most importantly, how it plays out being a part of this church. And as we enter into a conversation about marriage, so these, just for our listeners, these are questions that I'm going to be talking to these guys about are based on analytics of what people are searching oftentimes about marriage and conflicts that they have in their marriage. I do think talking about questions people turn in, what you're always stuck with is, and you've already mentioned it in this episode, is just how every situation is different. So it really is hard to give a general answer to a question that is so loaded with so much. So I want to start with a question that I actually think is pretty consistently relevant to married couples, at least the ones that decide or are able to have kids. And I'll never forget when Priscilla and I first started having kids, talking to Ron Hamilton and the advice that he gave, and it was just so refreshing. But it was just basically, Ron, this is hard. Like, marriage is hard, and now we have these kids, and everything is just hard and it's stressful and all that stuff. And it seems like it's harder than what it was before. And basically, he just very calmly was like, well, of course it's harder once you had kids. He's just like, it's not the same. And it's like I needed to hear that because I feel like we were maybe beating ourselves up for struggling in areas of our marriage where the problem was these beautiful creations we brought into the world who we love, but that was the obstacle, is they're taking so much time away from us and it's harder to find time together. But I find that I think a lot of times we don't give that enough attention and we don't give it the credit that it deserves. That's a big deal to bring kids into the world, and it affects how easy it is to have a healthy marriage. Wouldn't y'all agree?
Absolutely.
Y'all are experts at, or y'all are experienced with the kids thing.
Well, and it's crazy because I think that even every parenting season changes dynamics. The issues and challenges that you had when your kids are little are completely different than the ones that you have when your kids are teenagers. And so I think that time is always a challenge, but it is, it's different for different reasons. I think ultimately where there's a will, there's a way to find the time to spend together. And it is, it's not easy, but it's doable.
Yeah. And to me, it comes down to priority. Like when you were dating each other, there was really no question about priority. And maybe there are times where it could be hobbies or other relationships, friends, whatever, but like it was very clear in how you spent your money and your time that each other was a priority. And I think that as you progress through life with work and kids and other variables that come in, I think it's easy to unintentionally deprioritize each other. And so, yes, the season is different. And man, I don't long to go back to the days of sleepless nights, and because in terms of intimacy, in terms of, just you're exhausted all the time and you just feel like a different person when you're tired. All of that is very real. But I think the question I would go back to is, what would it look like for you to prioritize each other in this season? And so for us, that was paying a crazy amount of money for babysitting. And what's cool about that is that our babysitter for Miles, who's 17 now, he was 3 months old when she first started babysitting for Miles. And, she now works at Seacoast. She is so close to our family. She serves as our assistant right now. God just used that decision to prioritize our marriage and continue to do dates to bring people into our lives that are still a part of our lives, huge part of our lives, and have enriched our lives in major ways. And so, but to me, it comes back to right now they're teenagers and they stay up later than us. That's a problem.
And do you know that's real quick? Do you know that's biologically programmed? I just read a book on sleep, and you probably know this, but they're wired up. Their sleep shifts, whatever it's called, the biological terms, but they're programmed to be later. And so this guy in his book says, we need to change when let school in, because it's really messed up. They can't go to sleep. They have a hard time going to sleep. Then we wake them up at 5 o'clock in the morning. But
Listen,
anyway,
I would endorse that wholeheartedly. But for sex and intimacy, it's hard when your kids stay up later than you.
Right.
So you go back to, okay, are we going to prioritize this in our relationship? Are we going to prioritize each other? And if so, we got to solve the problem. And like Lisa said, every phase of parenting brings new problems, new challenges. But the question remains, will we prioritize each other, and will we be committed to solving those problems?
So how did y'all solve the intimacy one?
Apparently, this is crazy, but apparently
You need some advice, Joey?
the regular trips. There you go.
Apparently, there isn't a rule that it has to happen at night. I don't know. I thought there was. But.
Oh goodness! So here is an example of it. It's just gosh, if you're sitting in front of a person, the next question that you would ask is, "Well, tell me more." But there's a lot of women typing in, "My marriage is in desperate, like crisis condition, and there's a lot of men typing in the same sort of thing. We are, there's some disagreement on this, but I believe we do have some general things that men and women were wired up very differently. How would your advice look differently, or would it, when it comes to a guy just saying, I'm desperate, I don't know what to do, or a woman? Like, do you think that there's some gender things that are, hey, if I'm talking to a dude, we better zero in on this because we kind of know how men think, sort of thing?
I think so. And again, there's exceptions to every rule, right? But I think that generally speaking, men are going to be less inclined to talk to somebody about it. They're going to be more likely to suffer alone. And so my advice to a guy is going to probably start with, and it probably would be the same for a woman, but I'll let Lisa speak to that, but of like, hey, acknowledge it. Tell somebody that you're struggling. Like, get some help, get some counseling, all of that stuff. Because we just are going to tend to like think that it's a sign of weakness. Like, we just inherently think we should be able to solve every problem that comes our way. And when our marriage is struggling and we have tried different things, we've tried to figure it out, it's just almost like it feels disempowering to say, like, I don't know how to solve this problem. And so the enemy will just like, you're a loser, you're a failure, you're not good enough, you should be able to solve this problem, what's wrong with you? And those are the voices that will keep us as men from saying something, because nobody wants to get up and go, I'm a loser, I can't figure this out. But the reality is like the pathway to winning often involves acknowledging, like, I'm stuck here and I need some help outside of myself. And so my advice to the women would be, I think they tend to not be as slow to talk about it, but to be really mindful of who they're talking about it with. When I think about some of the marriages that are really close to us that have dissolved over the last couple of years, there's some patterns of, and it's not just women, men do this. Again, there are exceptions to all of this, but like, don't go surround yourself with other people who have recently gone through a divorce. Not because they're bad people, right? I'm not talking, but like, don't choose, this is the season that I'm going to really zone in on my friends who are either hate their marriages, going through difficulties in their marriage, or divorced, because you're going to potentially reinforce some of these things. Go find some people that have vision for you two together and are going to like remind you of the truth about your husband when you're so angry at him that you want to walk away, that are going to be like, hey, because you'll have people in your life that'll go, yeah, you should never be treated like that. You're better than that. There are better guys out there, or you're going to have people that are going to go, hey, like, you guys committed to each other. There's hope. Let's figure out how to get help. And so I think just being really mindful for both men and women of who are you, what voices are you listening to on a recurring basis, because they do shape how you start to think about things.
Would you add, because would you add a quantitative layer to this in addition to quality? Because quality of the person that you're talking to, you don't want somebody just like, yeah, you tell her what's up sort of thing. But I would even say, if you're going to go into the dirty details, and what I mean by that is the hard stuff with someone outside of your marriage, if you have to do that with more than two people, you may just be talking to too many people. I mean, I don't want to make it legalistic, but it seems like you don't need too many people to tell the details to. Would y'all agree with that?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And one of them should be like a therapist, somebody who could have a pastor, somebody that can at least speak truth to you. And yeah, I guess that's, and that may be where I was going with that, is not only like the types of people, but yeah, that you just don't, I think men maybe would never talk about it, and sometimes women may be inclined to talk too much about it. And again, as a husband, when I hear a compliment that Lisa gave second, third hand, like, man, she was telling me about how you did this and how much it meant to her, like that, just like, I mean, you might as well like put a cape on me and call me a superhero, because I just feel amazing. But also, if I hear like through the grapevine that she's frustrated about me, like it hurts, so.
Yeah, and I would say too, just more of a word of caution to both men and women. Not only choosing wisely the same gender to talk to, but just having your eyes wide open to know the tactics of the enemy. When you start kind of confiding in someone who's of the opposite sex, it can very quickly cause an emotional connection, and so just being conscientious about that, and again, I would just reiterate that people who are going to point you back to truth, people who are going to just personally, when we have gone through some of our marriage stuff, there were a few people I knew that I could go and talk with that were safe. They were going to, one, they were going to hold in confidence what I would share. Two, they would fight for us. They would fight with us and for us to help us. And I know that we could show up on the doorstep at, midnight, and they were going to say, come on in, like, let's talk. Because every couple gets stuck. And I think that is the deception of the enemy is for us to just believe that we're alone. No one goes through this. And that's just such a lie. Every couple goes through really, really hard stuff. And so to walk into somebody's door of a trusted other couple and say, hey, we are stuck. Here's where we're at. And to be able to share and for them to go, okay, so here's what I hear you saying. Here's what so many times the breakdown is in communication. We've already made up in our mind what he thinks, even though we're not actually listening to what he actually thinks. And so I just think, there's some pretty serious issues in marriages that are going to require more than just a trusted couple or friend. But if we could just get into the habit of going, I'm going to fight for my marriage however is best, whatever we need to do. And I just think people tend to go, like, she's never going to change. He's never going to change, Right. And so we just kind of move on, or we just coexist, and that's miserable.
Yeah. I would imagine with some of the conversations that you guys have heard on the podcast about the Billy Graham rule, and then with, just due to y'all's roles, the information that you're privy to with, like I said, couples around the world as well as right here at Seacoast, I bet you sometimes you're just like, if you only knew what we knew and have seen what we've seen with other couples, you wouldn't see this so complicated. It just boils down to, it's not a matter of people being good or bad. It's opening that door up to the emotional connection.
I think that's the big piece of it that, because one of the arguments about the Billy Graham rule, which if you don't know what that is, it's that you don't ride alone in cars or go out to eat with somebody of the opposite sex if you're both married, or if you're married and they're not married. And I think one of the arguments is that, well, men, you should just have more self-control because you sexualize everybody. And I think that's not, to me anyways, that's not the heart behind it at all. It's like recognizing what you just said, like, hey, there are emotional connections that can be made that aren't because one of you is bad or the other's bad, or women are always trying to, to me, it's just like a matter of respect for Lisa of like, hey, I'm just going to put that guardrail. And that means some things. That means that like there are certain people that I was really close to prior to getting married, and we're not as close anymore. It's not that I like called them and said, hey, can't be your friend anymore. But like we just kind of gradually didn't have the same like long phone conversations that we used to have when it was perfectly normal and okay to have those long phone calls. But it was a matter of respect for Lisa that I want her to be my first person that I'm going to unpack stress from work or to like process big decisions with and all of that. And then there are a ton of there are a lot of great women who are friends of mine, but they're friends of ours. And so we have a lot of great conversations in our living room with couples. And sometimes Lisa and I talking to another woman or sister-in-law, so it's not this I won't be friends with any other, but they're our friends, they're not my friends.
Mm-hmm. And likewise. And I think too, you can imagine the scenario. If we're at odds with our spouse and something really hard and potentially very emotional is happening, and you go and confide in somebody of the opposite sex, you're giving them your 10. This is the hardest thing I'm going through right now, which makes you in an emotional state. So it's very easy where it's I'm so...
And the women love it. The women love it. You're telling me about your emotions?
Yes, right. But that's,
I'm laughing, but it's true, and it's scary because it just happens.
It does. And so just it really is more of a safeguard. Right. We've put up pretty, not that we're super strict with each other. It's again, like Josh said, it's respect for each other, but we've put up intentional guardrails for our marriage so that we are always, because we have gone through hard stuff. And there were seasons where it would have been easy for us to go the wrong direction,
Well, and I'm super grateful. I remember a time that, and I won't give a lot of details because I don't want, whatever, but where you were hanging out in a friend circle and there was a guy that was there that we both loved and respected, but you kind of felt at one point your friendship relationship with him was maybe a little bit beyond what it should. Not that there was any emotional connection, but you're I just don't feel great about that. And you told me, and then you kind of made those adjustments. And so I think it's, again, that person, if I said that person's name, probably never would have thought there wasn't anything going on, but it was just I don't even want to get to a place where something could go on.
Yeah. The reality is, the danger zones. You know when you've entered a danger zone. Yeah. It's that, oh, wait a minute, this is not where I want to go. Yeah. And so
it was you, Joey.
Just kidding. Well, this brings up, and I know I would have permission to share this because it's a pretty crazy thing to share. But it's been about 14 years ago, but I'll never forget. I went on a missions trip through Seacoast, and I came back just in my head emotionally connected to someone, and there wasn't any sort of, this is something Priscilla and I talked through, this is a long time ago, but there was not ever any sort of, hey, we are both aware of this. It was only in my head. Now, I don't know if it was in her head or not. That's what I'm saying, is we didn't talk about it, but I came back so crushed. It just felt so heavy, and Priscilla could tell something, was wrong, and, it came across, it ended up being something remotely trivial, but for us to work through, it wasn't hard because she understood, and it wasn't it took me a long time to break ties because there wasn't any. But a pastor here who we would all take advice from and weigh it just like with anybody, but I'll never forget, he told me that next time something like that happens, and I'm asking y'all's, I want to hear what you guys think about this. This guy is older than us, but he said next time that happens, it may not be something that you tell your wife. And again, this is a situation where there was nothing between me and this other person. There wasn't anything that happened or anything. And he basically just, it was from the perspective of, you got to take in consideration what season of life your wife is in, whether or not me and you can handle something like this, just the two of us work through it, and then your wife never even has to mess with it. It wasn't in a, hey, this has got to be a secret, we can't tell your wife this. It was in a what's best for all. But what do y'all think about that?
Yeah, I think every situation may be a little bbit unique, but I do think that if I'm going to make a mistake or an error, it's going to be in confiding with my wife with something that maybe I shouldn't have. I think that especially when it comes to men and issues of lust, I think that, if you came home from work and said, hey, Lisa, I want to just outline every time I had a thought that was slightly off center and named names associated with that, I think that's probably going to be a little over the top,
No,
right? But I think that like what you're describing is you really felt like Lisa said that you had entered a danger zone, and you wanted to share that. And I think you honored Priscilla by bringing her into that. Just like, again, the one I was talking about with her, she shared it with me, and I was like, man, thank you for sharing that, because it would have been completely off of my radar. But in you sharing it, now we can like work together to make sure we protect ourselves.
And that dude's totally out of the church. We
fired him.
Yeah.
He actually didn't ever work for the church.
No, but think about it. Think about your process. The moment that you shared it with Priscilla, suddenly it was like, okay, like for me to share that with Josh, suddenly like I was in my head about it so much, but then for me to just be honest and be like, hey, I need to tell you, because my deal was with a mission trip too. And mission trips can, I mean, it's an emotional experience.
The pastor
so
that
you
I
have
told,
to be careful.
Yeah, the pastor that I told immediately put my mind at ease and said, when I was your age, I experienced the same thing. It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
I needed to hear that.
Well, it's more common than you think, but you take the power away from the enemy when you voice it. So my whole, point of telling Josh was that I do not want to go. I don't want to stay in this danger zone. I want to voice it. I want to be out of the danger zone. I want him to know. And honestly, like it brought freedom. Mm-hmm. Because then I'm like, I don't have any more, like, and I mean, this was, I don't even know, 20 years ago. Right. But like, that's the thing is like, if you didn't tell Priscilla, would you still be in your head about it for weeks after?
Right.
Or did telling Priscilla, one, give you accountability, two, set you free?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the question is, what needed to be done? Could it have happened in my case without Priscilla? And that's a question we'll never know because I involved her in it.
Yeah.
With, I have found too, when it comes to opening up and being open with those sort of things, when it comes to this kind of conversation, I think that a lot of people don't understand. When it comes to relationships outside your marriage, typically you're bringing your A game to the table. Priscilla's getting my A, B, C, D, F, and F minus. She's seeing the good, bad, and the ugly. So when I'm interacting with people outside of my marriage, or just men and women in general, I'm not even talking romantically. I'm trying to put out my best self because that's how we carry ourselves. At home, it's not the case. And I think a lot of people overlook that when they're connecting with someone at the workplace, for instance, they're connecting with someone's best version. And that's what they're sharing with each other. And then the emotion starts, and then they start sharing deeper. And next thing you know, you're in a situation you didn't want to be in. Yep. There's a lot of women Googling, my husband doesn't value me. A lot of women, like, what would you say to them? Do you think of all these women that you don't know their stories, but they're Googling away, my husband doesn't value me, what do I do?
Well, again, I think that one, the big question is, and this is kind of, I want to be sensitive to that question, but my number one question would be, are you finding your worth in your husband, or are you finding your worth in who the Father tells you are? And I think like when you are spending time with the Lord, when you are tethered to Him, I just always like think, gosh, when I'm tethered to Him, everything this way becomes so much easier, because He might come home and not have a great day at work or whatever stressors that He's got going on. And, if I've had time with the Lord, like, I can give Him like grace to be like, oh, he's had a bad day. Like, how can I love him? How can I serve him? How can I help him through whatever he's going through? If I'm finding my self-worth in Him, in which I've had seasons in which I did, then I'm looking to Him to give me value. Like, hey.
And for you, is it words of affirmation? Like you want to hear Him say stuff or spend more time? Like, what are you looking for?
My love language is quality time and physical touch. So if He walks in and he is completely checked out, he's on his phone, he doesn't come over and hug me, he doesn't, we don't connect at all, that I'm like, what's going on? Because that's just not normal for us. Now, I've learned a lot along the way. Like, he needs time to actually check out. We call it box time. It's like, he needs time to just like decompress from the day. And so I have kind of like learned like, oh, okay, like he needs some time. And it's not a personal thing. And I think early on in our marriage, I took it pretty personal. Like, wait, what? I've been waiting for you to get home all day, and now you're home and you're like on your phone or you're checked out watching something. And so anyway, but all that to say, I think that, but when I don't need him to give me value, like my core value, of course I need him to connect with me. I need us to have a relationship. But I'm putting so much pressure on him to fulfill something that he actually can't fulfill. So I think number one, first step is, are you tethered to the Lord? Are you connecting with the Lord? Are you finding like your core value from him? Because when you do, you can stand on your own 2 feet, and you can, like, when he's having a rough season, you're okay. Yeah. You can allow for him to have, a season of not being okay. But I would say, and putting the pressure on him actually just, it's almost like a vicious cycle. Like, I put unrealistic expectations on him. He's not able to meet those, which makes him feel, even worse. And then round and round we go. But I think that if we can give some space and some breathing room, and then when you're tethered to the Lord, it's like, oh, I don't need you to fulfill this for me, even though I want this connection with you. I want to feel loved. I mean, that's a real need,
Well, and I would also say, from a guy answering that question, if that stuff is all squared away, which I think that's the right place to start with it, then I would say, get in a moment of non-conflict, get really, really practical about what makes you feel valued by him. Like, hey, yeah, because we can be a little bit dense sometimes, and I'm not trying to put this dumb male stereotype out there, but there have been times where Lisa has answered the question like, it makes me feel valued when you blank, and when you spend time with me without your phone, when you buy me flowers, when you notice the work that I put into a project or the house or the kids, when you take note of what I've done, very practical things that when I see that and am reminded of that, I'm like, okay, I can win at this. I can make her feel valued in this way. So I think when it's not a codependency thing like what she's talking about, where you're really trying to find your core values met there, I think communicate, it's a love language type of thing, but I may be saying 50 times a day, I love you, you're beautiful, you're gorgeous, you're hot, but that's not what's making you feel valued. You're like, okay, thank you, I understand that, but what really makes me feel valued is quality time or acts of service or, gifts or, sometimes I think it can be, we're missing each other in communication. I think I'm telling her she's valuable, but she's not feeling it.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
well, and even creating a list, creating top 5 ways in which, if you want to go out of your way to make me feel valued, here are 5 very practical ways in which, if you empty the dishwasher, that's hot.
all right. So now that Lisa has jumped in, so are the 3 of us in agreement that these women who say, I just want him to know without me having to tell him, can we all just say, come on, we're too dense?
Yeah.
Josh, you said it. We're too dense. We can't read your mind.
Yeah. That's somebody who just wants to be miserable. She does, just.
Let me say this, though, okay? Because
I'm going to agree with what you say. We can try.
Here's the thing. The thing is that, no, I'm actually going to agree with y'all more on this. You can try, but I do I think there are different seasons of marriage. We've been married almost 24 years. What I needed in year 2 is completely different than what I need now. And so we as women have to just go, oh, my needs have changed, and he may or may not have recognized that. And so let us just take the guesswork out of it. Like, it's so much easier for me to say, you know what I need now, we have a house, we have 3 children, we have jobs, we have so much more on our plate. And so for you to see me and that I am running our house, I am running like our kids' schedules, I'm running our schedules, for you to see that and go, hey, let me take something off your plate. Hey, let me make the bed. Let me, those kinds of things. And so for me to actually like communicate those things. And this is why date night is so helpful, because we actually end up talking through a lot of these things. He knows me so well because every week we are intentional. We go on a date. We talk about all the things. We have fun together. There are some, and we talked about this in our message, the 4 Ds, the dialogue daily, date weekly. We depart quarterly, and then dream, or what was the other? Detach yearly. Like, we are intentional about putting rhythms of communication in our life, where he knows the things that are most important to me. He knows the things that are not important to me. And I would say the same for him. I think that it is for, the amount of time that we are intentionally spending together, but also the actual intentional details that we need to share with each other,
Yeah. All right, so we'll wrap it here. I know the right way to answer this, and I think we'd all agree that we never want to say, oh, we could never do such and such, or we could never struggle with that, because we put ourselves in a situation of maybe being blinded to something that the enemy wants to attack, or just our own human deficiencies. But you guys, at least from my perspective of someone who I consider you guys friends, I'm not in your inner circle of talking daily or anything like that, but y'all seem to be in a healthy groove for years. Like, it seems like for a long time y'all been in a good season of marriage. Would y'all say that's would. Would you say that it's important for you to keep on the forefront that that's not a given? I think the answer to that is y'all would be like, well, of course, that's why we have these things in place. But my question is, deep down inside, do you really, as a human individual, do you really entertain it as a possibility? Do you think, here we've been married for, you said 24 years?
Almost.
Yeah. And you're in a later season of life, the kids are getting older. Do you think there's a possibility that you two, the harder season or the hardest season is yet to come? Do you think that's a possibility in your head?
I mean, I think anything is possible, but I would say, I think we have hard things come into our life that we have learned to tackle together. Whether it be in leadership or with kids or whatever, those things, we've learned to be each other's teammate to help with. I think as far as marriage goes, again, I don't foresee that. But I also have been married long enough to know that, I don't know.
And we've seen friends that we never would have guessed would walk through it. And I do think that those rhythms and being not just something we talk about on a platform, but that are actually very, very important to us, give us a really good shot of not. But I also, neither of us have lost a parent, thank the Lord. I know, as we get older in the older seasons, I know there are challenges that we haven't had to face yet that we will face that will put pressure on us, and I think we have to choose. And that's where I think what you're saying, the way we've learned to tackle the problems that have come our way, it's helped us to do it in a way that we're working together through those problems versus letting them become something that gets in between us. But man, we're in a great season, but we've had some big fights. We've, when we went on our intensive, we spent some time talking about a big fight we had about a year ago or so that, again, thankfully didn't last very long, but we hadn't really processed it fully, which is what was so helpful to have somebody else involved to go, hey, let's talk about why that did make you so mad, or why did that set you off in that way, and to understand each other at a deeper level.
Well, and I think too, I think the greatest gift of intensives is, while, we were working through some marriage challenges, the greater thing that I think we both gleaned from it was actually working on our own stuff. And so for us to be going through a personal intensive, but together, where we're actually there to support each other, was really beautiful. And I think that what people tend to minimize is that childhood trauma or things that they have gone through in the past is not playing into their marriage. False. That is false. There are so many things that we tend to misinterpret because we're interpreted through the lens in which we grew up with. And so we don't even recognize that some of the things we grew up with were dysfunctional, or that trauma is still causing a response in us. Maybe our spouse is reacting to something and they're having a trauma response. There's just so much that we don't recognize. And so going to something like an intensive gives us eyes to see where we're broken, and it helps us to heal those wounds, and then to actually realize, neither one of us, if this is the issue, we need to attack the issue. He's not the enemy. I'm not his enemy. We're for each other. And so, the more healthy that we are, so it's the better before bigger again. The more healthy that we are as individuals, the better that our marriage is going to be, because the more healthy we can process things with each other. And so that, I think, is just was one of the greatest gifts, was just being able to process some of the hard stuff that we both have gone through in our individual lives.
Yeah. Do you guys think that couples in general are sometimes not prepared well by church people when it comes to self-care? I think it's changing, but at least when I was young, self-care wasn't even talked about. You put others first, that's your calling. And I feel like early on in marriage, that's what I was working towards also, was everything about this woman matters. Nothing about me matters. That's kind of how I thought I needed to do it. Do you think that's changing and self-care is more acceptable nowadays?
I just think it's misunderstood.
Yeah.
I think it's misunderstood that self-care is not actually caring for your spouse.
Exactly.
Because you can't actually care very well if you yourself are not healthy. It's the whole oxygen mask idea. When the oxygen mask comes down, put it on yourself first before you put it on your child, right? You can't help someone else or be of service to someone else if you yourself are not breathing.
Yeah.
So,
and the whole love your neighbor as yourself. Chips obviously talks about that probably on this podcast, but so often we think love God, love your neighbor, but we forget the as yourself piece of it, that if you're not loving yourself, you're going to have a hard time loving your neighbor. If you don't have a good self-image, that usually projects itself in destructive behaviors towards other people, because you treat them how you see yourself or treat yourself. So, yeah.
I will say this about premarital counseling. I do think that it was actually pretty helpful for us.
Yeah.
In that, I remember recognizing that my expectations for marriage were slightly rosy. It was I had rose-colored glasses, we're never going to fight. We're never going to have any issues, So really just, honestly, because I remember the early days of us being married, our first year of marriage was hard. I don't think that we knew how hard it was because it was still our first year of marriage. Looking back, it was whew, that was rough.
Mm-hmm.
And we were just trying to figure it out. But I do think that going to premarital counseling and realizing somebody saying, hey, you are going to have issues in your marriage. that make you contemplate divorce at some point. That to me was such I was so grateful for that, because when we did go through hard stuff and I was going, is this going to work? Are we going to make it?
You need
I
to
didn't
push in
feel
further.
alone,
Yeah, and you knew, this is when I push in further.
Yes.
This isn't when to throw the towel in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, there were several things there that were really helpful.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys. Love y'all.
Thank you.
We love you.
You've been listening to the Things You Won't Hear on Sunday Seacoast podcast. In the show notes, you'll see a link to our Facebook group page. Also, we'd love for you to consider subscribing so you get these episodes downloaded right when they come out. Thanks so much for listening.